It's really important to remember, as I've just described it, where the tax cuts were, where the spending increases came from, and then how we intend to defend Social Security and Medicare and do the responsible thing and raise the debt ceiling. The debt ceiling shouldn't be held hostage to this sort of conversation, particularly when you participated in increased spending, which, by the way, was all valid. All valid. The CARES Act. Speaker Pelosi and I, with Secretary Mnuchin, we negotiated that legislation in her office. Many of you were witness to it when you saw the final product, and we came out of the Speaker's office at the time with Secretary Mnuchin calling in back and forth over 8 days. They all voted for it. And I call attention to that because now they want to say, well, we're not going to raise the debt ceiling until you agree to irresponsible cuts in domestic spending. Better to have the discussion right now. Let's set the table. Let's get to the debate over Social Security and Medicare. Happy to engage. Brendan Boyle.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Richie.
Didn't want to overdo it.
So I'm Brendan Boyle, Brendan, not Brandon, incoming ranking member of the Budget Committee. And actually, let me build off what Richie just said and focus on one area as part of the adopted rules package last night, and that's cut go. You know, you can always tell when there's a Democrat in the White House because their Republican colleagues suddenly become concerned again about deficit and debt. When there's a Republican in the White House, they conveniently forget that topic. But every time they take over and there's a Democrat in the White House, suddenly there's this focus on deficit and debt. Well, here's the hypocrisy in what they're saying. As part of Cutco that they reinstated last night, any tax cuts that they propose do not have to be offset. So all of those critical investments that Chair DeLauro spoke about, critical investments in the American people, education, jobs creation, helping veterans, all of those have to be offset according to their rules. But another big round of tax cuts, like what they did the last time they're in the majority, $2 trillion tax cut, 83% of which went to the wealthiest 1%, not one dime of that would have to be offset. So keep that in mind when they are crying crocodile tears about our national debt. I would also say, as Chairman Neal did, the debt ceiling should not ever be something we play around with. It is too dangerous. This country has been able to get through and weather government shutdowns. We would not be able to weather a compromise in the full faith and credit of the United States. It would cripple not only the US economy, but the world economy. This caucus has the responsible position not to play politics with this. The other side has been threatening repeatedly, as recently as last night, to refuse to raise the debt ceiling because they're so hell-bent on cutting Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. We won't let them get away with it. And now it's my pleasure to bring back our chairman, Pete Aguilar.
Thanks, Brendan. Questions?
Chairman Aguilar, Adrian Diaz from CBS News. Should the discovery of President Biden's classified documents been disclosed before the midterms?
Well, let's step back and talk about this for a minute because, and I appreciate the question. This is Republican hypocrisy at its finest. When the former president had 320 documents found at his personal residence, they said that, quote, that will not be a priority. What President Biden did was disclose this to the archives, let law enforcement know. That is exactly the way that you should handle this. So we're going to support the fact that the president is following this established protocol, that he did the right thing, and see what other and see where we go from here. But we're not interested. Republicans aren't interested in having meaningful oversight. They're just interested in opposing this president. Go ahead.
What do you say to critics who argue these documents were discovered November 2nd, midterms were November 8th, and they could have been withheld to avoid potential damage against Democrats before the midterms?
This was done in consultation. You saw Merrick Garland have a U.S. attorney weigh in at this point. This is being done the exact way, getting the archives involved. Someone who was on the January 6th committee, there is a process to handling documents. The president is handling it the way he should. That's what's important here. Go ahead.
To follow up on that, though, I mean, in April, we knew about well, in August, we knew about the search warrant executed at Mar-a-Lago. Isn't that sort of a time when everybody goes, let's just make sure we don't have any of our own? Isn't this a little bit sloppy to not have this go through things on the Democrat side to make sure that when they're saying this is terrible, he has documents, let's also make sure that we don't have any documents?
I don't think that's a question for me. That might be a question directed down the street. But what I'll tell you is this is being done. This is being handled the way he should. I mean, this is not about August. This is about today. Where we are at. The president is handling this the way that he should. He's disclosing it. He's letting the archives know. Law enforcement is aware. We're handling this with the seriousness at which it deserves, but we're not downplaying this, which is exactly what House Republicans have done. Did you have something, Richard?
No, just to say the Justice Department has the issue.
Can I ask you about House ethics? Obviously, Leader Jeffries announced some assignments on the committee today, but Republicans have tried to gut the committee with, various provisions that they released. Obviously, George Santos is now a member of Congress. You guys talked about, obviously limited things you could do before he was seated, but now he's a member of Congress. What are your plans?
I'm going to yield to Vice Chair Lieu, who talked about the Republican rules package in the Office of Congressional Ethics. Kevin McCarthy owns George Santos, lock, stock, and barrel. If George Santos wasn't seated, what would the math have been for Speaker McCarthy? He would have had to flip another vote or get two people to vote present. I mean, this is he owns George Santos. That's the only reason why he was seated, is to give George Santos that ability to vote for Kevin McCarthy. So let's call this exactly what it is. There should be repercussions. The state and federal governments and the law enforcement agencies should look into it. The FEC should look into this. I know that there might be an ethics complaint that's filed here as well. But this is an incredibly serious issue from someone who clearly is divorced from reality and sanity. But this is at the feet of Kevin McCarthy, not just George Santos alone. Vice Chair Lieu.
Thank you, Chairman Aguilar. So the Republican rules package says that you cannot hire any staff to the Office of Government Ethics after 30 days. Why would they do that? You should ask them, what is the rationale for doing that? Well, the rationale is to shrink this office, because if anyone leaves after 30 days, they don't get replaced. And eventually there's going to be no one in that office, because they don't want the office investigating people like George Santos. And as Chairman Aguilar noted, arguably George Santos was the deciding vote for Kevin McCarthy for Speaker. It was also disclosed yesterday that when George Santos was fundraising, apparently his fundraising person was telling folks that he was actually Kevin McCarthy's chief of staff. So if they were using the telephones, which I assume they were, that would essentially be conspiracy to commit wire fraud. So what George Santos did was not only unethical, it appears to be highly illegal. And you have ethical investigations, but also you have what looks to me like criminal liability. I think Speaker McCarthy needs to talk about what he thinks about George Santos and really put him up for condemnation or an expulsion vote from this Congress.
Just one last point on that. If George Santos wasn't seated, I might be giving another nominating speech. And so, we could still be going at this. Garrett and then Leanne.
Nobody wants that.
Absolutely. Thank you. 9. You didn't like anything with one of the 9? Come on, Garrett.
Here's a populating committees this week. Speaker McCarthy's reiterated his desire to not seat Adam Schiff or Eric Swalwell on the Select Committee on Intel, should their names be put forward. Is it the caucus's intention to put their names forward to be seated on that committee? And what happens if Speaker McCarthy follows through on that thread and strikes them from the Intel Committee?
That's a steering for Leader Jeffries, as well as a steering and policy committee. So steering and policy will meet once we have the ratios. in negotiation with the majority, we'll have those ratios. We will populate our committees and we will send the names of the individuals who this caucus supports and are qualified to serve on committees. What the speaker does beyond that is something that we will handle. And I know you have a bunch of hypotheticals for me, but it isn't anything that we're going to get into today. So the process,
The chairman, presumably he's not going to be left out of the bottom of a
the
ratio
pro
question.
the process is that the caucus will advance the nominees and the individuals who we feel best reflect the Democratic caucus, our democratic values, and have the ability to lead, including ranking member Schiff. And so they will be put forward. What the speaker does beyond that is something that that the leadership team and the steering and policy committee will have to handle. Leanne?
I have a committee question. Today the House is going to vote on this new select subcommittee on the weaponization of the federal government. Democrats are going to have seats on this committee. Do you plan to seat Democrats on that committee? And also, Representative Omar has publicly suggested that she would be interested on that committee. So is she being considered for it?
There's a process. We call that the tinfoil hat committee in our caucus. There's a process by which members will raise their hands and let leadership know what they're interested in. It is our intent to seat members on every subcommittee, every select committee, every subcommittee that the leadership on the majority side advances. It's in our best interest to make sure we are representing the will of the caucus and the American public, and that Republicans don't have an opportunity behind closed doors to shape and to add to these conspiracy theories. That is not in the interest of the American public. And by the way, none of these issues that they are advancing have anything to do with lowering costs that Americans are facing. This is all about campaign promises and a secret 3-page document that none of us have seen that was the path for Kevin McCarthy to become speaker. And so we're going to continue to do the business of the people each and every step of the way. Let's go over here.
For Chairwoman DeLauro and Caitlin Politico, how do you plan to appropriate around this handshake agreement to set spending levels at fiscal 2022 levels? I mean, presumably, at the very least, we'll need a CR, which will maybe be at fiscal 23 levels. So how do you plan to actually get this, fund the government, get this done, avoid, partial shutdown and work around what McCarthy promised?
Well, I think that my point is that you cannot pass appropriations bills without them being both bipartisan and bicameral. So and the president will not sign. So I think this notion that you can deal with 2022 levels, that appears to have been part of this secret deal, that you then may be looking at guaranteeing a shutdown. We will operate in the way that we have, bill by bill, with the issues that are important to us. I tend to, you don't want to work. I think it's very interesting to note that in a divided government, last December, you may recall, we passed an omnibus bill, a bipartisan omnibus bill. 9 Republican votes in the House, and I think close to 19, somewhere around that, in the Senate. So we were able to govern. The issue is going to be is whether or not the Republican majority can govern. But we are going to, as I say, we will work together, we will cooperate, but we are not backing off the critical investments that have been made, that will continue to be made, because someone traded away the well-being of the American public and our national security for personal gain, for a vote. No way to run a government and no way to govern.
I'm gonna ask Chairman Neal and Ranking Member Boyle as well to comment on this, because I think it is so important that we do talk about what that document is laying the groundwork. It's laying the groundwork toward dysfunction, default, and potential government shutdowns that none of us want. Ranking Member Neal.
Sure. Thanks, Pete. Just one quick observation for those of you who have some institutional memory here. You really believe that Republicans are going to embrace a government shutdown? How have the politics of that situation worked out for them in the past, dating back to Clinton Gingrich? If there's one thing that the people that have been on that side for a long time remember, they have lost every showdown over shutting down the government. Believe me, they are not going to shut down the government for sure.
Look, we all know in the end what this is about. When Social Security was created in the 1930s, Republicans opposed it. They have opposed it in every generation since. As recently as late 2004, when George W. Bush was reelected. If you remember his first press conference the day after the election, he said, "I have political capital, and I intend to use it." And what was his number one priority? To privatize part of Social Security. Now here we are, and don't take my word for it. Just read the press statements of Kevin McCarthy a couple months ago. Every single one of the Republicans who was running to be my counterpart on Budget Committee as chair, they were all saying they intend to use the debt ceiling as leverage to win cuts to Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. To their credit, they're being public about it. Now, I've worked on this issue my entire time here in Congress, working to attempt to depoliticize this bomb to our economy and the worldwide economy. I'm so proud of this caucus, not just House Democrats, but working with the White House as well. We are firmly united on this. And just as Republicans lost back in the Gingrich Congress in the mid-1990s, just as they lost in 2011 on this issue, they will lose again in 2023.
I just want to make one point. You know, I think you all will recall last December, I was, swarmed with so many of you are in this audience today. I mean, just overwhelming. Are we going to shut the government down? Are we going to shut the government down? This is going to lead to a government shutdown. And just absolute no, we are not going to have a government shutdown. Why? Because there was a willingness to work together with our colleagues in the House and our colleagues in the Senate, in order to be able to fashion public policy that was going to be beneficial to the American people, whether it was their national security, which was their jobs, job training, whether it was veterans, and we came to an agreement. That is singularly the issue of ability to govern. As the chairman said of Ways and Means, that they won't shut it down, but we will wait to see what their process is going to be. We know what our process is going to be and how we're going to continue to move at keeping government moving forward.
Last question. I'm sorry.
Building off of legislation about the IRS from last night, Republicans are now putting forward a bill to entirely abolish the IRS and the federal income tax. Any reaction to that?
I'll let Ranking Member Neal speak, but this
Laughable.
it is just fanciful. The depths at which they'll go, and we can talk about exactly what these dollars, what the financial benefit is to the taxpayers to collect these tax receipts. This is about making sure that everybody pays their fair share, and that the richest don't get to avoid time and time again the ability to do that. I'll let Mr. Neal talk a little bit about that proposal.
Yeah, just the facts of the issue. So Charles Rosati, who's lettered to me 2 years ago, former IRS commissioner under Bill Clinton, he said there's $574 billion annually that goes uncollected. And Charles Rettig, the IRS commissioner, a Republican under Donald Trump, said that number is closer to $1 trillion annually that goes uncollected. Now, what we voted for last night, or voted against last night, was to remain consistent to our position, and that was computer modeling, replacing retired IRS officials, which have been cut by 30% over the last 15 years. We addressed that, and enhanced technology. For those of you who are stuck at airports with Southwest, the one thing you should be reminded about, now the evidence points to technology and the lack of its sufficient upgrade that created the chaos. That's what happens with the IRS. Every year for our local school systems, 200 teachers retire, you replace them. They haven't done that at the IRS. So don't go by what I have to say about this. Charles Rosati, Democrat, Charles Reddick, a Republican. 574 billion. Think of what you could do with that. $574 billion a year that goes uncollected. And back to Commissioner Reddick, who said $1 trillion a year goes uncollected. That's the tax gap.
Thank you.
Thank you.